What's going on, everybody? Doug here, one of the hosts, producers, and creators of the Genre of Your Life podcast, bringing you all a review roundup episode this week. I'm a little behind on my watch list for some shows and movies, but this weekend I saw Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, as well as Amazon Prime's new movie, Roadhouse, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, which is the remake of the cult classic from the 80s starring Patrick Swayze. But I'm very eager to review these movies for you this week. And like I said, we have a lot on the pipeline this month for April, that is, for the podcast. I know Nick and I are seeing Monkey Man next week, Dev Patel's directorial debut, produced by the one and only Jordan Peele. Looking forward to that. And we got stuff like Challengers, we got stuff like Abigail. So look out for our reviews and reactions. And then boom, I think May 1st we're in full summer movie season with The Fall Guy, and I'm so stoked for that movie. I cannot wait. So look out for our review for that. Like I said, could go to April 1st with a lot of April stuff on the pipeline, so look out for our reviews and content. And as always, guys, you can find the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music. Google Podcasts is now going to be YouTube Music, I believe, starting April 1st or this end of March. So for all you Google Podcast people, make sure to have your YouTube Music now kind of switched over to. So look out for that. And as always, guys, please rate and review the show. It means the world to us, whether you're on Spotify or Apple, Amazon, YouTube. We want to hear from you all. The feedback means a world to us. It also helps the show out a lot. For our Apple Podcast listeners, we have a goal right now of getting to 200, hopefully by end of April, early May. So again, if you're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever, please rate and review. But especially for our Apple Podcast subscribers, please help us get to 200. It means the world to us. Again, we need to get 200 for more opportunities for content, more review, stuff like that. So please rate and review. And thank you so much for your ongoing support. It's going to be end of March already. We're already 4 months into the new year. We've had a great year so far with the podcast and a lot more reviews, a lot more reactions. So, your support really means the world to us. So thank you again from all of us here at the Genre of Your Life podcast. Alrighty, guys. Like I said, we have 2 reviews for you this week. First up, I'm going to do Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I think it's a big movie over the weekend. I think it got 45 mil opening weekend, which is pretty good for a Ghostbusters movie. I think the last one made the same thing, but also we're still kind of during with COVID. Theaters were still not so open. The new strains of the virus were coming back and forth. So the movie did relatively well for the budget. Also, again, coming out of COVID and people getting back to the theaters. So this one did kind of about the same with a bit of a bigger budget, but still new big movie over the weekend. Yeah, gotta support Ghostbusters and nostalgia of it all. So let's get into it, shall we? Ghostbusters to me is a big part of my childhood. They're a big part of the reason why I love movies. They both, even the second one too, guilty pleasure to a degree, but again, they were a big part of my childhood. I remember watching them with my parents on VHS. I just this is why I love movies, just the magic of it all. Everybody from Ernie Hudson to Bill Murray to Dan Aykroyd to Harold Ramis, Sigourney Weaver, Rick Moranis, Annie Potts, the movie is just so magical. And to me, I think people say this a lot. I think the first Ghostbusters movie is damn near a perfect movie because it's a blend of comedy, science fiction, horror a little bit with great laughs. And it just really is a kind of standpoint of kind of a little bit of the beginning of the hybrid genre mixing. You can definitely do science fiction with comedy, a little bit of horror. You definitely do horror with some comedy, and having those 4 great leads of the Ghostbusters it just works, and it's definitely a staple of American comedies, filmmaking in general, and directed by the great Ivan Reitman, who we lost about a few years ago. But they're a big part of my childhood, big part of my childhood. So I remember when they announced they're going to do a sequel reboot of the original trilogy, of the original 2, I was in London during my semester abroad, and I was like, whoa, okay, I'm interested now. And I remember the trailer they put out this was one of the best teasers ever. It's on YouTube too. You're in a field somewhere, some suburb, some farm, and you hear kind of the music a little bit, and the camera goes into kind of a little abandoned kind of shack outside of a farm or a suburban area. And then you go to Ecto 1, and you see the wind kind of flashes the Ghostbusters car, and it's a great teaser. It's coming soon, summer 2020. This would be before COVID happened, obviously, but it's really one of the best teasers ever. One of my favorite trailers of all time. So if you haven't seen it, it's really cool to check out. In less than a minute, it's a perfect example of a great teaser, great marketing for an upcoming movie. And also too, I don't disrespect any of the people involved with the 2016 remake. I think Paul Feig's a very talented filmmaker. I think, again, you have great comedic talent there with Kristen Wiig, Leslie Jones, Melissa McCarthy, and Kate McKinnon. That movie to me just felt more like a really weird Mad TV or I don't know, a bit of a SNL parody of Ghostbusters, where I think everyone kind of agreed that, like, hey, you know what? If the movie was like the ladies kind of find it again, they were hardcore Ghostbusters fans, like they found the stuff, whatever they found, like the proton packs and the firehouse, that would have made more sense. But remaking it entirely with really bad cameos from the original people, minus the late great Harold Ramis, it just kind of felt off. It kind of felt just like really weird. And I don't want notice to Paul Feig as a filmmaker. I think I love Bridesmaids and I love Simple Favor. I love The Heat, stuff like that. He actually made one of my favorite movies as a kid, Accompanying Minors, which is like a really family kind of kid tween movie about kids who were like left at the airport during the holiday, during a blizzard. It's a very one of my, again, guilty pleasure childhood movies I loved so much as a kid. But again, also made some good stuff on The Office, a lot of television shows. Great filmmaker, but I don't think he really knew how to handle a big IP or big budget movie like that scale. Again, even Spy. I love Spy. One of my mom and we love that movie so much because it's so funny. It holds up very well. Again, I think he's definitely better with original material, i.e., again, Bridesmaids, Spy, The Heat. I think Simple Favor based off of a book, but still it's kind of a wheelhouse of like kind of comedy with a little bit of drama, a little bit kind of like that. So I don't think he knew how to really kind of like create or manage a really big budget IP movie like that. And obviously didn't really do it too well over the when it came out during summer of 2016. I remember like parts I definitely enjoyed about it. Like there's some things that are kind of funny about it, because it just felt really just like a really weird, like kind of like almost like a sketch comedy kind of thing. And it just the writing wasn't good either. And so again, you had great talent involved with the actresses and people behind the scenes, whatever, but it just felt like a really kind of weird ripoff of Ghostbusters. So that didn't do well. So I guess Sony was like, hey, you know what? We're gonna remake the movie. We're gonna reboot it. And what I love about it too is that, well, first things first, I absolutely loved Ghostbusters Afterlife in 2021. I love that movie. To me, just like it's one of the best reboots. I think one of my favorite reboots of all time, if you ask me, just because I think like that movie itself was a love letter to the original Ghostbusters movies, to Ghostbusters fans. And to me, it's really cool to see that, hey, Ivan Reitman, the director, his son, who I think he's like a little bit of cameo in the second Ghostbusters, also a very, acclaimed filmmaker, Up in the Air, Juno, Young Adult, on and on and on. Like, great filmmaker. I love Up in the Air, one of the best movies ever, if you ask me. And I love that, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to make one because my dad made one too. I'm going to do one as well. And it's really cool that, like, his dad kind of, like, passed down the mantle to his son. I love that. And I was so hyped. I'm like, that's so cool. I had goosebumps. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, his son is doing it now because he's son of the original Ghostbuster. Like, that's really cool to see. And, taking the mantle of his own. And I love that because also, too, we lost Ivan Reitman, like, right after that movie came out, like, early 2022. So it's really cool to see, like, his dad, got to see him make a Ghostbuster movie of his own. I love kind of, like, the whole thing of, like, just passing the mantle down, which is kind of the theme of the Afterlife too, like passing down from Egon to Egon's grandkids. I very kind of poetic, if you ask me. And the thing about Ghostbusters Afterlife too is that it did a great job of using nostalgia, but also mixing in new stuff for new generation fans and new Ghostbusters fans. Because I feel like, a lot of movies that are set in a certain time, or movies that are like reboots or whatever, long way sequels, rely really heavy on nostalgia. And I'm definitely kind of like vocal about that to a T. Also, I didn't grow up in the 80s whatsoever too, but seeing it from other shows and movies, that nostalgia is kind of like a drug that people like to use a little too much of. Like, hey, look, look at this poster, look at this song, look at this hairstyle. It's like it's overused a lot now in film and television. I thought that, wow, they took the Ghostbusters movie out of New York, they brought them to like Oklahoma somewhere, and it was kind of its own thing, using some kind of like special nostalgia elements mixed in throughout. It wasn't didn't rely heavy on it. So I'm like, what? Props to that. So with this one, I was kind of skeptical. With Frozen Empire, I was kind of skeptical going into this one because I thought, like, okay, the last one ended really well. Like, it brought back the franchise in a really great way. It also concluded the kind of Ghostbusters franchise all together. I know there's some post-credit scenes too in Afterlife, but I was like, cool. If it ended here, this is a great way to end. You brought back the OG Ghostbusters. You kind of a love letter to, Ivan Reitman, Harold Ramis, Ghostbusters fans, the story itself. So my kid, and they announced the new one. Like, okay, the last one made pretty good money, given the time and everything. But I was kind of like, why was this made again? I love the last one so much, and I was like, okay. And then I found out that Gil Keenan, who co-wrote the last one, is directing this one, and then Jason Reitman's gonna produce and write this one because he's gonna step down from directing this one. I'm like, it's cool, still involved. So I was like, okay, a little skeptical, but still excited. Sorry for the pros, obviously. I again love seeing the OG crew back, of course. I like that they utilized Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson a lot in this. So, I mean, out of all of them, almost a spoiler, but like out of all of them, those two have the most screen time, most kind of like, they add a lot to the story compared to like Bill Murray or Annie Potts or other characters. They really heavy rely on Ernie Hudson and Dan Aykroyd, which I think to me was kind of sweet because they do a great job of kind of just like saying like, hey, here's what we are in our life, but also it's kind of very, again, also poetic in a way that like the way they were talking, it was kind of like talking to like themselves as like Ernie Hudson and Dan Aykroyd, like, hey, this is our golden years. This is like, hey, this is where we are now. And I thought that was very kind of like sweet and very special to have them kind of both like kind of share these moments together, like in a Ghostbusters movie years later. But still love seeing Bill Murray and all of them, Bill Murray, Andy Potts, Ernie Hudson, Dan Aykroyd, because it's like you can tell they're having fun and kind of like bringing back the band back together. They've lost, Harold Ramis, Ivan Reitman, and also I don't want. A certain person you probably know from the originals have not made it, has retired from acting overall. So unfortunately, that person's not in this movie or even mentioned the last two. So it is what it is. But it is cool to see them have more screen time than the last one. I know people had a problem with Afterlife, how they were used at the end. I was like, I kind of liked it. It was kind of like a perfect way to like bring them in, and thing with the Harold Ramis thing was very sweet and very kind of like very special. So I was like, I like that how they were used in the last one, but they definitely have a lot more screen time, a lot more to do in this movie for sure. Also, too, I like that they brought back William Atherton. Atherton, I'm probably butchering his name, as Walter Peck. He was kind of like the douche in the first one that kind of like hated the Ghostbusters, like he had a vendetta against them. He's now the mayor of New York City, and he's still a douche, and he still has a vendetta against the Ghostbusters. I remember as a kid, just like I couldn't stand this guy. I'm like, you're ruining the Ghostbusters. You're just like you're definitely a worse villain too. And it is really cool to see him come back, because to me, like, I had the same feeling as a kid. I was like, I still don't like you. He's still such a douchebag. Like, you ruined the Ghostbusters or whatever, but now he has more power because he's the mayor. But it's really cool to bring them back, because they could have been like a thing added in last minute or whatever, or like, guess what, here it is. But I thought it was kind of cool they brought him back as Walter Peck, so I appreciated that. You know what, too? Speaking of new things in this franchise, I really do enjoy the chemistry between Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon. I think they're both, again, great actors. You can tell they're having a lot of fun being in these movies. I think the first one showed like really kind of like their charm together, like really good chemistry. It was really kind of quirky and funny, but it was added a lot to like the overall heart of the movie. And I think this one too, that carries over even more, or as the same, because I think it's really charming to watch them kind of play like love interests, and also they kind of explored more of their kind of like relationship as like, romance, and like where Paul Rudd stands as like their kind of like stepfather to Finn Wolfhard and McKenna Grace's characters. And I like that it wasn't like, hey, guess what? In that first one, yeah, they were in a little bit and that's it. They still use them just as well, or this about the same in this one too. And I'm like, cool, it wasn't like kind of a forgotten thing. It was like they brought him over like right away. You seemed all together, like no time has passed. McKenna Grace, man, I thought she really stole the show in the first one. I think she's great in this. She's a star. I mean, again, it's so much fun to watch her kind of just like really kind of like embody a Spangler. Like you can definitely tell like she's doing a good job of kind of living up to the legacy of Egon Spangler, who was her grandfather. And there's subtle things you notice in the first one, in the Afterlife, and in this one too, that reminds you of Spangler and Harold Ramis's performance. I thought it was very, for an actor of her age, she has a lot to offer, a lot of charisma. I think it adds a lot to the heart of the story, as in the first one. But again, watch for some certain things. You can tell like the way she moves her glasses, the way she kind of like talks to someone is very Harold Ramis-esque, or really Egon Spangler-esque. And I was like, wow, I'm really impressed with her, just knowing the kind of certain small things, the minor things of how he moves or talks, whatever, is very kind of like really reminiscent of Spangler's character. So kudos to her. And one guy who I was like kind of a little skeptical about, but I'm a fan of him, from stuff like the Big Sick, and I love Silicon Valley, was Kumail Nanjiani. To me, I think he's trying to find like his thing, kind of like post Silicon Valley. I don't think Eternals worked, unfortunately. I'm trying to think what else has he done after that I saw him in. He's kind of guy that needs that good like supporting cast, or kind of someone to play off of, like in the big Sick, that that's based off his wife, obviously his real wife, and like what he went through during that time, stuff like that. I do think that he's very good with an ensemble or people to play off of. Again, Ice, Silicon Valley, stuff like that. To me, he really worked. I found myself laughing out loud whenever he was on screen. The way he was interacting with the original Ghostbusters, like Bill Murray or whatever. Because again, at first I was like, okay, how are they going to use him? Because in the trailers it was kind of like very just like one note and very kind of just like, look, Commander Johnny's in this movie too. And it's like, okay, but how are you going to use him in this movie? But I'll tell you what, I found him really delightful. He has a lot to offer in this movie. He's definitely playing a guy that we all encountered before, like guy who always wanted to make a quick buck, very sleazy, like what's in it for me? Like, oh yeah, I'll sell you this for like $2, whatever. What else do you want? Stuff like that. He's very kind of like that sleazy kind of like, kind of scummy, but really like always out for a quick dollar. But he's a lot of charm in this. I think there's a lot of charm to it, and I think that his art that he gets is very kind of fun to watch. I thought they utilized him very well. It wasn't too much. It wasn't a little bit. I think that his arc and what they gave him was fun to watch, and it's really cool too. I was listening to a podcast or an interview with him before the movie came out, actually, a week or two ago before seeing it, saying how much like. I mean, this could be a PR thing, but I want to believe that this is true, that how much like Ghostbusters meant to him as a kid, like that's his movie. Like it means the world to him to be in this movie, like how much like Ghostbusters influenced his love for comedy and, movies, stuff like that. So it's really cool to see like a super fan, have a role in a Ghostbusters movie. So yeah, it's cool to see that. I was kind of like, it's cool to see like him fulfill his dream as a Ghostbusters fan to be in a Ghostbusters movie. And what I noticed kind of pretty early on in the movie is that I appreciated this too, that they were using both like CGI and practical effects, and I think they did in the previous film too, which I really liked a lot. And that kind of warmed my heart because, gave me the feels of like the original films of how like, back then it was really early on visual effects and CGI, but a lot of it was so practical, the books were moving, the library, stuff like that, like the slime, whatever. But seeing them utilize, practical effects made me kind of feel like a kid again. Cause let's give me the feels of like the original Ghostbusters movies, and a movie with this kind of budget, with $100 million plus budget. I did appreciate the fact that they still were utilizing practical effects and not solely using on CGI. Obviously, the CGI is more in this movie than practical effects, given the budget, given like the time we're in with filmmaking and visual effects, stuff like that. But I think after a while, and like a lot of movies nowadays, just feel like after a while the CGI kind of feels overdone or just kind of feels very bland. And no diss to any, hardworking CGI previs VFX artists. I think a lot of movies now are just using that way too much as a crutch. Like, look at this cool stuff. And so to me, I'm just like, okay, like, that's cool, but like using practical effects really goes a long way. Again, i.e. like Top Gun Maverick, when you saw a lot of that was definitely practical. What they want to do with stuff like that, or given Christopher Nolan track record, they want to do a lot of stuff practically because it's still like kind of like the OG, very kind of like cinematic way. So, but I thought the CGI in this looked pretty well for the most part. There's times where I was like, it looks kind of a little rough here and there, but for the most part, they did a good job. But seeing the small practical effects stuff really kind of warmed my heart and kind of made me applaud a little bit. Costumes, of course, were great. Everyone's still rocking the OG jumpsuits. Everyone has their own jumpsuit now, even the new characters from the last movie and this one. But tell you what, it was really cool. They have this like new facility / kind of like lab, and a lot of them are wearing like kind of these new red jackets with like the OG logo on the Ghostbusters logo on the side. I thought they're pretty damn cool. I think they use a lot of them more at the end of the movie. I thought they were really cool, kind of like almost kind of a bit of an updated Ghostbusters uniform. I'm like, that's cool that they're introducing new stuff, years later to the attire. Like, hey, you know what? We still have the cool jumpsuits. Don't get me wrong, they're still there, but like seeing the new kind of red, like kind of almost like fireman jackets were really cool. And I was like, kudos to them for bringing new kind of style to the Ghostbusters attire. Also too, I like this too. I think the first one obviously has this a lot too, is that the horror element to this is back. I do think that like I found it darker than the last movie for sure. A little similar to like Zool in the second one a little bit, but more of that lines of the first one of like they have to go a horror route in this, and I was like, this is pretty dark. It's definitely darker than the last one. And I think they wanted to explore more of like supernatural horror aspect and how dangerous this villain that they're dealing with and his backstory, what it could be. And the movie starts off right away of like how dangerous this villain is they're dealing with, and it's like, whoa, wait a second. But again, I do appreciate that they kind of went more of like the horror or supernatural element in most of the movie. To me, I think the score of this, I guess you probably heard me ramble on about scores the past year or so with movies that to me the score was very definitely paying homage to the first two films, and at times getting kind of goosebumps because it was like, oh, making me feel like a kid again watching the first movies on VHS with my parents. And I believe this is correct. I want to double check this. I want to like make sure. I think the original composer of the Ghostbusters movie, I think his son was my professor at film school at ASU. I'm gonna double check. 'Cause I think his dad is again iconic filmmaker, iconic composer. Yeah, Elmer Bernstein. Yeah. Elmer Bernstein, legendary composer. Animal House, Ghostbusters. I mean, list goes on and on. I think the Max 7, I think, remake had the original and the remake was his music as well. I mean, again, legendary Stripes. A lot of, Three Amigos. I mean, let's go Trading Places, on and on and on. So his son, Greg, was my professor in film school. A really good dude, and really cool hearing his stories about his dad and like how he is in Hollywood stuff. That was really cool to watch. And so shout out to the Bernstein family, and shout out to his son Greg, who was my professor at film school. So, but again, hearing the music definitely kind of made me kind of have the goosebumps, and kind of like paying homage to it a lot was very cool, very sweet. There's a library scene which is really cool. Probably it's in the trailers too. That put a huge smile on my face. It's from like the first movie where they're in the library and the woman goes shh, and the ghost pops out, whatever. And there's a podcast called Real Blend, a great show. They had the director and writer Gil Keenan on, and they were saying that they found unused 70mm footage from the first film from Sony Pictures Archive that was not used, and they used it in this one. And you see in the trailer, and the movie looks just as good. I'm like, oh, it's so cool seeing like before I saw it, I was like, oh, it's cool. Like it's cool they're using the actual like kind of like paying homage to it. And here that's actual footage from the first one is really cool. I thought they used it very well. Very kind of quick little fun Easter egg to it. So I thought, I appreciate that even more, using the kind of like going back to the archives and finding stuff from the original movies. It very kind of like, again, makes my movie geek heart feel very warm and very happy. But if you heard my theater reaction to, again, going to the cons now, I did not love this one the way I loved the original movies as well as Afterlife. So again, in my reaction, I said, this is more of a hit and miss for me. I think it was a little bit over the place. And after sitting with the movie now a couple of days, there's some things that just not kind of sit with me or kind of fell flat. I'm like, oh man, I wanted to love this movie, how much I love Ghostbusters, how much I love Afterlife. Right away, I think to me the humor is not consistent. I saw it in a pretty somewhat packed theater opening weekend, and when the jokes were not working, it was pretty obvious because no one was laughing, no one was even chuckling or giggling. And for a semi-packed theater, you can definitely tell. You hear definitely like a pin drop, whatever. You're just like, wait a second, no one's laughing at this. And it was apparent that they wanted to like really like make jokes. And except for a somewhat semi-packed theater, I was like, oof, this is kind of rough because you're like, watching the movie, look, a joke, and it's not landing, and it's kind of a little like awkward. But when the jokes were landing, everyone was laughing, having a good time. But I do feel like it was 60-40 that they weren't working. Majority of the time they weren't working, where like, again, people in my row, people behind me in the front, they weren't laughing. It's like, so the humor wasn't as consistent or as kind of like on the money as like the other movies were. And again, I don't know how hard it is to take on, make a movie like this, whatever, but I had a problem with some of the acting and some of the characters, like the character of Melody. Again, I'm trying to keep this non-spoiler, obviously, played by Emily Alyn Lind. I found her to be very boring and monotone. Like right when you introduce her, she's kind of just like, sure, you're not scared of me? Oh no, yeah. Like she's there reading lines like off of like someone's feeding her lines like off screen, or just like she was not interested whatsoever because she felt dull the entire time. There's supposed to be a lot of emotional scenes with her and her character and the way she presents them. It just seemed like she just did not want to be there. Like I said, they were like, hey, the line is, don't do that. I'm telling you, don't do this, whatever. Or, hey, my story is this, blah, 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 blah. It just felt very boring to watch. I do feel like some of her lines were kind of just fed to her off screen because she just seemed so uninterested compared to like with her scenes with other characters and her emotional arc. I was just like, do you even care about your story or like what you want to present? And the whole time, no, not her. Okay, I'll go. It's like, give us something, like, I don't know. Like maybe she just didn't really know what to do with the character. Maybe that was the direction from Gil Keenan that she didn't know how to like, take whatever. But it just felt very monotone and boring, if you ask me. And I'm like, oh, it's not working. And whenever I try to bring her story in, sometimes I'm just like, it's not interesting, not really adding much to the overall story. And speaking of phoning it in and weak performances, again, this nothing. I think it could have been the writing, could have been direction as well. The character Lars, played by James Acaster, again, talk about one note and poorly written and weak performances. He was trying to be this like annoying, like hard ass, like kind of teacher's pet, like once everyone to follow the rules, like don't touch that or don't do this, da da da. And he just the whole time he's giving nothing. It's again monotone, or one note, like the melody character, like he just like, yeah, I know, sure, yeah, curl, yeah, no, do that in British accent. No, not a good idea. No, sure, I don't know, it's over there. Oh wait, what happened? Like he just again, it was just like, dude, you got to give something. And again, that could have been the direction he was given, or it could have been like this how he interpreted the script. But both of them just did not feel like they wanted to be in this movie. Really, they know what movie that they wanted to be in. It's like pick or choose, give us something. I just felt both of them just felt really bored and so like zoned out on the screen. And it's apparent. I mean, maybe I'm reading this too much, but seeing a lot of performances the past all my life, you can tell that they don't want to be there. They're just like whatever. And another thing too, like he had a really bad injury being in the movie that was pretty like, oh shoot, like what happened to this? And like later on, like a day or two later, like it's a pretty severe injury. Like I've had a lot of injuries in my life, like you don't walk those off. And this guy had a really severe injury. In the next day or so, he's carrying like heavy stuff, and his arm is fine. Like the continuity is non-existent. And I'm like, wait, what happened to your arm, homie? Like you had a really bad injury that was like really like focused on and being in the movie. What happened to it? Nope. I do think they kind of gave him nothing to do after like the first 20 minutes. And, like he's at the end, he's in the middle. He's there throughout, but like he's given like nothing to do. He's kind of like, yeah, cool. He's just there. He's there, part of the team now. Like there you go. And he's kind of again giving nothing. He really hasn't done. Honestly, like nothing to add to like the overall like story, and just like what are you gonna add more to like this? So again, it's a little apparent that it's, you don't want to be there. And also one thing I noticed a lot from other other critics and other reviewers, that there are a lot of rules in this movie that they set up about like ghost extraction and certain rules of not doing this, following this rule, whatever. And later on those rules are broken, and it goes against like everything that they set up in the beginning. And like, why bother to tell us in detail what you can and can't do, and be like, what, let's ignore it. It is what it is now. And from other shows I've listened to, other podcasts, you're like, wait, if you set up this, wouldn't that do that? And again, they're like, nah, it's fine, it's whatever. It's like, well, you should follow your own rules. If you went in detail, you took time out of the movie to explain how this works, why this is important, and then later go, nah, it's whatever. It kind of feels cheap. It kind of feels like, are you calling us dumb, whatever? You don't even care about it? Because we all remembered, and I'm glad I wasn't the only one that kind of said like, wait, you told us this. But I don't know. I think if you set these rules in the movies, you gotta follow. Hey, you gotta follow them. Like, hey, you know what? Because again, if one like hey, what is what it is? Like, yeah, we mentioned it in passing. That's one thing, but you took the time to really go in depth and detail of like how this works and what happens, and then I go, it's whatever. Feels cheap. And there's something major, again, trying to keep this spoiler free, but like at the final battle during like the major climax, there is something that happens that goes unresolved, and I'm like, wait, what about the other thing that just happened? Like, wait, that thing gets thing, but like, wait, what? And they don't address this at all, and it's something pretty major that goes unexplained, unanswered, not brought up ever again. I'm sitting there like, come on now, that's just lazy writing. Like, again, why bother to show us this if there's no kind of like follow through or follow up, like what's gonna happen with this? And they kind of go, that's it. And again, to me, it feels cheap and feels lies really heavy into lazy writing. And I just I don't know. This to me, I was like, it just bothers me a little bit as a movie fan and stuff like that. And another thing too, I think I heard some other podcasts as well. I could be misreading this. I definitely could be wrong. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments or the ratings, whatever. But I think they were trying to introduce a romance subplot with this, and I thought it didn't work whatsoever. There's no chemistry between these two actors and characters. It just felt not needed. Like, it didn't really add anything to the story, and it felt really flat. And it was kind of like the movie came to a halt trying to include this romance. It took away from the story, very distracting, because they have no chemistry. They have no chemistry. They have no kind of just no like really interest in each other. I felt like, and it felt really flat. Whereas like maybe it was, again, the writing could have been part of it. I mean, the direction as well. But to me, like, these two characters have no no chemistry. And it's like, it seemed like there was like, again, just like, okay, we're gonna do this, blah blah blah, here you go. Just took away from the story, and it just kind of felt like not needed. It was like, look, romance, but they didn't feel like romantically evolved, attracted to each other. It just kind of just felt like, okay, sure. There was no chemistry, and I was like, oh, they have some chemistry, have some like kind of like pizzazz to it, but I didn't feel that. I mean, maybe if a different actor playing a certain role that I'm talking about, and keeping this spoiler free, maybe that could have been it, but I just kind of, it didn't really go anywhere. I kind of felt like, all right. And also too, one of the characters in this romance, their arc felt so predictable. Right away, I was like, I know where this is going. Like, it's a simple like, oh look, I'm this person. Look, now I do this. Oh no, like, it's like this person. Like, I knew right away the person was gonna be a certain way in terms of just like, morals, and just like what they want to do to other characters and where they stand, stuff like that. And the writing didn't help that whatsoever, because I think the writing right away knew like, look, this person, are they good or are they bad? I don't know. And it was pretty damn apparent really early on that like, hey, this person's gonna be evil. This person's gonna like to betray someone. And I was like, again, it's that lazy writing kind of issue. And I think, like I said, I mentioned this really brief too. The main issue for me was that the whole time watching this, I kept asking myself, why was this made again? And I swear, I thought the way the entire movie, from the beginning to the end, I was like, hey, I'm excited, but like, I was a little turned off by that, because I'm like, it seemed like they just wanted to keep making Ghostbusters movies and trying to capitalize on all the success of the reboot in 2021. And I believe they should. I truly believe that Afterlife was a perfect ending. Ended there, very beautiful, and kind of again a love letter to Ghostbusters, to the movies. Harold Ramis, Ivan Reitman, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, everybody. And with this, I just didn't feel like, it felt very just like, hey, Ghostbusters, people love Ghostbusters, let's put it out. And I'm like, I don't know. I just okay, I guess you want to capitalize on your biggest IP, biggest IPs and franchises, but there was no need for this movie. I don't see the need for this movie, and I just wish if they were gonna like go another one, make it really count, make it as good as Afterlife or better. And to me, just kind of just felt like really rushed and really just kind of like, oh, look, Ghostbusters movie, people will come into this, yeah. And I'm like, okay, just didn't feel like, I didn't feel the love behind this one the way I felt the love behind Afterlife. And another thing I noticed too that they sidelined Finn Wolfhard and Celeste O'Connor's characters, Trevor and Lucky, like hard, because they had nothing to do in this movie. It just felt like a total downgrade for them from Afterlife. Like, they were there to make a quick joke once or twice, or just let the fans like, hey, look, they're here too, they're back. And I kind of felt bad for them, because they had a lot to offer in the first one. They were already set up a lot in Afterlife as well. But in this one, they felt wasted. They had nothing to do. And I do think that, like, bring them back. I'm using them to the story a lot. They kind of just like here and there to make a joke, or just like, oh, look, it happened. They were there to see it. It's like, okay. And I think even with like the character podcast, like, he had a lot to do in the first one, and he doesn't have a lot to do in this one either. But they do give him a really kind of like a storyline to like, now he's Ray Stance's prodigy in New York City as well. And I just feel like the way they used Trevor and Lucky in the first one was set up way better, a lot to offer. That, like, their romance felt kind of real and kind of felt like authentic. But this one, they were like, okay, we're bringing you guys back, but like, how do we use you? And they just didn't know. They didn't know what to do. Like, here, you're here in the background, whatever, sure. Like, the biggest thing, and it's in the trailer, so it's not spoiling, but the biggest thing that Finn Wolfhard has to do in this movie, it's in the trailer, is to get slimed by Slimer, and goes, great. And I was just like, what? And I was very disappointed with that again, and thought it was a waste of their performances and characters. It's like, then why even bring them back? And I tell you what, I felt the same way with Patton Oswalt. And I really enjoy watching Patton Oswalt and everything. I grew up watching him in King and Queens, on and on and on. But to me, like, he's in a few scenes. And I'll tell you what, like, he doesn't really have a huge part to the story. And I think the trailers kind of make him like look very more important. Excuse me, more important in the actual movie, because I think also I've been a fan of the franchise, a friend of the Reitmans or the filmmakers, whatever, because he's there to like, look at me, I'm gonna put you on my journey, make some few jokes, and I thought his scenes don't work at all. It felt like they kind of wasted him as well and his overall character, because I felt like they just used him to move the story along and just adds nothing to the overall just like plot. And I'm like, that was kind of a waste. And again, in the trailer, they set him up to be like kind of this big like, oh, I know what's gonna happen, blah 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 blah. No, and I was just like, come on, man. I just again, you have this talent, don't waste them. And again, couldn't that go back to the writing again? It's like, what are you gonna do with these characters? How are you gonna make them interesting? How are you gonna make them, integral part of the story? And this kind of feels again flat. And the whole time I'm thinking this as well is that they should have released this movie in the summer. Like, I think it would have been better received and could have worked more as the movie, take place in the summertime. It's a hot summer in New York City. Like, it was so hot, everyone was like sweating. It was the hottest heat wave, whatever. And I think they could have played into that, the marketing, like, this summer, prepare to be froze, or this be freezing or frozen, whatever. Or this summer, the Ghostbusters are back. Like, because kids and teens who this movie's more marketed towards, and also OG Ghostbusters fans, are on summer break looking for something to do. They want to go see a movie. And I think Sony could have done a lot with the marketing in terms of just like, hey, look, Ghostbusters this summer, it's hot outside, go to the movies and cool off with Ghostbusters and Frozen Empire or whatever, something like that. And I do think that the movie could have maybe done a lot with the marketing, but also I think it may have been released better or kind of have more like a better opening weekend. Personally, I think it was tracking to like what it made, like 45, 50 plus, whatever. But I think it could have made a lot more money if it was released in the summertime. So I do think, we're definitely getting back to like summer blockbuster. Last year was kind of rough with Flash and Indiana Jones and Transformers. Obviously, the big movies last summer were obviously they were Barbie and Oppenheimer and some hits here and there. But this should have been a summer movie. I don't know why they released it in a random weekend in March. Or it could have been even Easter, would have made more sense because it was a holiday weekend. But this being released in March had kind of made no sense personally. And as I said briefly too, this was directed and written by Gil Keenan, who co-wrote Afterlife with Jason Reitman, and Jason only came back to write and produce this one, and they pitched this idea to Ivan Reitman before he passed. To me, I can tell the difference between the directing and the storytelling. Jason Reitman is a top-tier filmmaker. Like I said, I love Juno and I love Up in the Air. Young Adult is a very underrated movie, and he's had a lot of success with his career in filmmaking and directing and telling like really kind of relatable stories. Where in this one, again, I don't want to trash Gil because, excuse me, I've seen podcasts with him, I've listened to interviews with him. He's been a really nice and good dude who loves Ghostbusters and passionate about this story. But you can tell the quality of writing and directing has changed. And I think that when you go from someone who was really close to Ghostbusters, i.e. Reitman, the family, and someone who has been a very acclaimed filmmaker most of his career, I think that all his movies, Reitman's career, Jason that is, led him to do a Ghostbusters movie that was kind of like a legacy thing. And I think that with this, you can tell it wasn't as directed, or the story didn't really know where it was going or what it wanted to accomplish or say. I do think that Jason didn't direct this one. I think if he directed it, may have been a different movie, different outcome. But again, that's me personally. But if you watch these two movies back to back, which I did, you can tell the dip in directing and storytelling quality for sure. I'm kind of torn like how to rate this one too, just because there are parts where I liked a lot, and there's parts I'm just kind of like, nah, it just didn't work. So right now, I'm giving it either a 5.5 or a 6, because there are parts I liked a lot about it, and those parts where I was like, I don't know. So I think I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 just because I definitely had goosebumps a lot. And again, I really did enjoy seeing the OG crew back together, seeing Annie Potts was brought back a lot in this one, Ernie Hudson, Aykroyd, everybody, Bill Murray. But I don't know. Again, I had fun with it at times, but it just kind of felt like very jumbled and very messy, where it was just like, this was, again, kind of like a quick look, Ghostbusters are back, but why are you telling this story? And I didn't feel that way the way I felt with Afterlife. So yeah, I give it a 6. It might change after thinking about it more. So again, if you're a diehard Ghostbusters fan, you gotta go see it. Again, obviously, but again, I do think, again, if you gotta go see this movie in theaters, I would say go for rental or discount matinee or discount Tuesday, because I think paying full price for it is a bit of a waste. But again, if you're a diehard Ghostbusters fan, you do you. If I were to rank these movies, I would probably go obviously Ghostbusters '84 original, Ghostbusters 2, kind of tied with Afterlife. Afterlife I love a lot. It just hit me all the right ways. So kind of tied. And then this probably Frozen Empire, and if we're gonna include the 2016 remake at the bottom, right after Empire, Frozen Empire, 'cause I'm just like, I just didn't work for me either. So yeah, guys, that is my review of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire in theaters now, and that's my ranking of the Ghostbusters movies. But now transitioning to streaming, actually, we have Amazon Prime's new release, which is Roadhouse, the remake of the 80s film with Patrick Swayze. Get full context too, kind of like Exorcist. I've never seen the original Roadhouse. I've seen clips of it. I knew about it, what it was a little bit, somewhat. And I was like, oh, cool. So they're remaking it for Amazon Prime. Jake Gyllenhaal, one of my favorite actors. I was like, oh, heck yeah, I'm into it. Doug Liman, who I think is a very underrated director with stuff like the Firstborn movie, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Swingers, Edge of Tomorrow. And now this, I was like, oh, cool. Doug Liman's doing it. The guy, one of the writers who did wrote The Nice Guys. Love that movie. I'm like, I'm in. And then I think it premiered at South by Southwest early this month, at March. And I was hearing like awesome things about it. And I was like, okay, cool. And I think what I did smart this time as well was that I voted the trailers. I'm like, what? I'm going blind to vote the trailers, whatever. Again, I'm sold whatever from the people involved. And I was hearing great things about it. I'm like, oh, cool. I can't wait for March 21st. I'm there. And then more people got to see it, screenings, stuff like that. And I was hearing the narrative change of like, this movie sucks, this movie's kind of shitty, whatever. And I was like, oh man, like, all right. And I was hearing rumors too that apparently it was supposed to be a theatrical release. Amazon Prime said no, it was gonna be streaming. And then I know a lot of drama behind that too, but I kind of saw like the narrative when this movie sucks. And I was like, oh man, I was looking forward to it. I think when I watched it on Sunday, it had like a 65, 57 on Rotten Tomatoes. Now it's like a barely fresh 60. And to be fair, I, as a critic, as a reviewer, I'm very kind of like opposite. Time a majority of critics, I might love a movie that they may hate, or vice versa. I'll tell you what, this movie is awesome. I had a ton of fun watching this movie. I really did. I think it's a perfect streaming movie. I mean, if it was in theaters too, I probably would have seen it in theaters as well. Don't get me wrong, but I had so much fun with this movie. And again, I think that's credit to not watching the trailers or in the marketing. I had a big smile on my face throughout. I think the action is really cool. It's really fun. The stylistic camera choices were really cool. How they shot the fights and whatever. I was like, this is awesome. I'm having a great time. I'm like, why are people hating this movie? But I understand that, like, if you're a diehard fan of the Roadhouse, it might be like, not my Roadhouse. What are y'all doing? And again, it's the typical thing of like, running out of ideas. We're making everything now. And I had so much fun. I think Jake Gyllenhaal is a lot of fun to watch. I think he's ripped the way he was in Southpaw, which is a great movie from his as well. But everything kind of worked for me. I liked him. I liked Jessica Williams. What her name is. I love her. I think she was great in Shrinking. Great in Intergalactic. Let me sure I got her name right because I don't want to butcher. Yeah, Jessica Williams. I think she's really charming. She had a lot to offer. She's super fun. And I like that it was kind of like this little central location, kind of like this off place in Florida. It wasn't like Miami. It wasn't like, Orlando or whatever. It was like kind of like small little part of Florida. Like no one really knows about, so these people. And again, not knowing what to expect. I was like, okay, I'm going with the ride. What's wrong with it? And like I said, the action charts, I was like, oh, let's go. I thought the comedy was very funny too. The way they kind of integrated the comedy with the action, stuff like that. And, I think John Hall's very charming and very kind of fun to watch. He's kind of playing this kind of like psychotic bit of a asshole, but he means well. He means well, and wants to like kind of like Lone Ranger kind of guy. Like comes into this like lone cowboy, comes into this town, whatever things are happening, kind of has to like save the day a little bit, which again a little cliche in most other movies, but the way kind of like holds himself, the way kind of like the way kind of like sees how the town is being treated by these just like these assholes, and the way kind of intervenes and kind of just like makes a mess of everything, kind of like intervenes with like just the bad people's plans. It was fun to watch, man. I really had a fun time watching with it. And, not being a huge MMA or UFC person, Evan McGregor is hilarious. McGregor is hilarious. And I was like, oh, man, like, you see a lot of athletes turn, actors. Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is so much fun to watch, and he steals the show. Like, right away, I was like, okay, this is fun to watch. And he's just like really having the time of his life. And you see a lot of like debut performances from athletes be like, this is kind of rough, this is kind of bad. The character he's playing and the way he's playing him is very Conor McGregor, just like, yeah, look at me, and it works. And it's funny seeing it is funny seeing like the way he interacts with Jake Gyllenhaal, the way he's kind of interacting with the crew he's part of, whatever. Like, he's playing this total psycho, like crazy person that like is like there, to cause havoc too. But it's really fun to watch. And again, he's having the time of his life, kind of like playing this like evil, just really violent person, and it's super fun to watch. And whenever he's on screen with Jake Gyllenhaal, like, because it's funny seeing an actual MMA UFC fighter fight a actor who's trying to be a UFC fighter. And there was times where I was just like, yeah, okay, like, there's no, come on now, this real life, McGregor would kick his ass. Like, there's no way like Jake would get a few punches in here and there, but like there's no way that he would like really, the way he's kind of hitting him in certain fight scenes, like McGregor would knock you out cold and be like, good night. So I really did like seeing his kind of acting debut a lot. And again, I get a lot of props to Doug Liman for kind of like the way he kind of shot the scenes, shot the action, because it was very unique. It was like not one take. You could tell it was definitely stitched, VFX, and obviously here and there. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of hate about the VFX. Now, didn't really bother me as much personally, but I can see why it bothers some. But I thought the way like Lyman shot the fight scenes, the way like very kind of like in your face, and the way kind of just like stylistic approaches were very cool and very like, oh, this is kind of refreshing in a way. I mean, it's no John Wick obviously, but I appreciate too. Most of it was hand to hand combat. Like, again, I love seeing cool gunplay. Obviously, John Wick, Equalizer, stuff like that. But I really do appreciate when movies kind of go back to like the hand-to-hand kind of like fist fight combat, because it's more like intimate, it's more kind of like rough and personal, stuff like that, which is really cool to watch. So I was having fun with it. I had a fun time with it. But I will say a lot of the cons I had with it was the dialogue is cheesy, and like I said, the overall story is kind of like, again, the Lone Ranger, Lone Wolf comes to town, starts wreaking havoc, like has to get involved now, very like Jack Reacher-esque to a degree. And some of the dialogue, some of the one-liners, I was like, okay, this is corny, this is cheesy. And I think what people talk about the original movie too was very kind of corny and very cheesy. And I think that they were kind of like embracing that a little bit in this movie, but they embraced it a little too much. We're just like, okay, you're doing a little much of it right now. We get it. But that to me, I was like, it's a little corny. And there was predictable things too. I was like, okay, this person's bad, this person's this and whatever, and then it's predictable, whatever is going to happen. This is going to turn to you, whatever, blah, blah. So I do think like that was like, okay, it's a little predictable at times. And I think the girl playing the love interest, she was great in the Suicide Squad, Fast and Furious. She's in a lot of stuff now. I was kind of like, love interest, yeah, okay. Just they didn't really have much chemistry between the two of them. It kind of felt like, look, yeah, like we're both good looking and we're gonna have romance. It's like, okay, sure. I just didn't feel needed or wanted. But I had fun with it. I really did. It's brutal. It's definitely a hard R. It's definitely a violent movie, and I was like, I didn't expect it to be as violent as it was. I was like, whoa, we're going here. I'm like, all right, let's get on with it. And to my point earlier, there are some like VFX shots where I was like, oh yeah, this looks overly VFX and overly CGI. Like certain boat stuff, certain stuff in the water, you're just like, yeah, this looks a little too CGI. And there are some things too that people get hurt or injured that I'm like, there's no way you're walking that off. You would be dead on sight. Like someone falling off boats, someone falling off like vehicles, stuff like that, or getting hit by vehicles. I'm like, you would be dead. You would be dead. You would be just done for. And people walk it off. People are like, oh, I'm fine, I'm good. I'm like, no. You would be dead. You would be gone from this earth. You would been dearly departed. So I'm like, okay, wait a second. So a lot of the movie, I think, is like, yeah, like suspend your disbelief, kind of like a Fast and Furious kind of thing, but not to that level, of course, of like craziness and insanity. But in terms of just like practicality and like realism, it's like, no, that would not happen. That would not be something that would occur or like you get away from easily. But again, I think it's a fun time watching it. I am glad it's more of a streaming movie. I think it probably wouldn't do well at the box office. I've been like, people are like, another one of these movies. But another thing too, I think me not having seen the original Exorcist, again, I know one of the few people, including Nick, me and Nick are the few people in the world that actually like the Exorcist Believer sequel, reboot, whatever. from October. With very, very few of us. And with this too, I'm hearing people are just hating this movie. Again, maybe not having seen the originals of both those movies. I like them a lot. Maybe if I went back and watched the original of both Exorcist and Roadhouse, I might be like, okay, I see a little different now. But I think not having knowledge of both of these either movies made me enjoy these new ones a lot more. But I'll probably go back to and watch them eventually. But I had fun with this movie. I think probably my top. And here's been kind of slow so far. I think probably my top 10 of the year so far, probably a little bit of the bottom. But I had fun. Again, I want to see a funny, goofy action movie, and it delivered, and I had fun. So I give this an 8 out of 10. I really had a good time with it. If you didn't like it, I can understand why you had problems with it, but for me, it's kind of like it's action, kind of like love watching kind of like fighting and goofy stuff. It worked for me. It did. So again, 8 out of 10. But yeah, guys, I hope you enjoy this review roundup episode this week. Yeah, we have a lot of things in the pipeline. Like I said, coming up this month. We got Abigail, we got Monkey Man, Challengers, a lot coming up. So stay tuned for that. Like I said, please review, rate the show. Apple Podcast listeners, please, we need to get to 200 hopefully by May 1st. So we need your help and support. So yeah, guys. So as always, we'll see you at the movies.